Recording in progress.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So, last session we learned about how to handle the AJAX calls. So, we learned about connecting, connecting with any remote file or URL and accessing data from there. For that, different techniques you learned. So, XML, HTTP request, and fetch, and jQuery AJAX, and Axios. These are the different techniques of connecting with any remote API and accessing it. So XML HTTP is the native method for browser, and fetch is a window related promise. jQuery AJAX provides jQuery AJAX library. We can communicate with API with that library, and more features better than other. We have third parties, and one third party is Axios. By using that, we learned how to connect with the API. So today we will see how we can use some remote live APIs, how to access data from them and use. Actually, so we have some free API. Free APIs are there. We will see how to work with them. After that, we can connect with our own APIs. We can create our own APIs and work with them. So free APIs, you have so many APIs here. Like one is API NASA GOV. Means to practice connection with APIs, you have this one. This is going to provide some data related to space data related to different space related data is available in this NASA API. We have another one is a fake store API. And this fake store API, it is going to provide some data related to ERP. So this is usually online shopping like website. Data is available with that. And another is we are having a open weather API. This is another API. This is open weather API. This is related to weather. Hundreds of such APIs are present. You can try any of them. So these are some samples. What we will do today is we will learn how to connect with a remote API, how do we access the data, and how we can present. After that, we can create our own APIs. We can design our own APIs. So for this, actually, what is the concept of API and how this API works? What is the key point about these APIs we should learn? So generally, the frequently asked question is, what is API? What do you know about API? Any idea? What is the concept of API? So you are going to work with APIs. So first you should know what is this API. So you are going to work and handle the APIs. So you should have a good idea on what is this API is all. What do you know about APIs? I hope you might have worked with these APIs in even JavaScript also. What is the concept of API? So to understand this API, you should know about, means to answer this question, what is API? You should know about distributed computing. You must know about the concept of distributed computing. Actually, in software technologies, we have different types of computing architectures. We have parallel computing. We have distributed computing. We have cloud computing. Like this, cluster computing, like that. In software technologies, there are different types of computing architectures: parallel, distributed, cloud, cluster, like that. Different computing architectures are present. In that, API belongs to this distributed computing concept. So, software technologies follow different types of architectures. In that, API belongs to the concept called distributed computing. So what is distributed computing? Actually, see, distributed computing is, let me show you different computing architecture. So different computing architectures, we have, these are the computing architectures. Various computing architectures are present. Distributed computing, cluster computing, cloud computing, grid computing, parallel computing. So you may not be always aware of these things because your level is just only about developers. That means you are from the background of only development. Then it's not expected that you know all this. Because architects who are more than developers, right? They are responsible for handling this. They are responsible for managing these computing architectures. So we have different types of computing architectures. In that, API belongs to a concept called distributed computing. Actually, what is this distributed computing means? Generally, distributed computing means distributed computing allows two different applications running on two different, allows communication actually. Communication between two different applications running on two different machines, or you can say two different devices. Distributed computing allows communication between two different applications running on two different devices or machines. Not only that, so there is another point about distributed is it allows communication between two different objects, two different objects running in two different process of same device. Communication between two different objects running in two different process of same device. This is called distributed computing. So you are going to learn and work with APIs, so you should know this concept. API belongs to a concept called distributed computing. Distributed computing means actually, see, suppose we are having two computers, two devices are present. In this is suppose server device, and this is some client device. Now in server device, we have one app running, we have one application running, and in client device, we are having another app. So this app communicates with the server app. It can access data from that app. It can use the data from that app. For example, that means two apps running in two different devices, they are communicating, they are sharing information between them. This is called distributed computing. Actually, this distributed computing, for example, suppose we are having this like Amazon. We are having like Amazon. I'm opening Amazon in a browser. This Amazon is present on server. We are accessing from server and we are opening in a browser. Similarly, we have something like Netflix. We are accessing and watching on browser. But without browser, we can access Netflix by using a Netflix app in my device. What is difference between watching Netflix in a browser and in an app? So that means you are watching YouTube on an app, you are watching Amazon on an app, you are using Flipkart app. These are all distributed apps, distributed applications. So in your mobile, you have Amazon or Flipkart or Swiggy or Zomato or something. They are not mobile apps. Generally, people call them as mobile apps. They are not mobile apps. They are all what? Distributed apps. Mobile apps means what? Calculator, calendar, phone books. All these comes under mobile apps. Netflix, Amazon, Flipkart, these are not mobile apps. These are all what? Distributed. If anybody asks, is Amazon web application or distributed application? Is Netflix web application or distributed application? They have both. They have web application as well as distributed. Distributed means what? Distributed means two applications running on two different devices. They can share information, they can communicate with each other. That is called distributed computing. Another point is that in one computer, you have two different process. In one process, one app is running. In another process, another app is running. Now, these two apps can share information. That's also distributed computing. That means two apps running in two different machines can share information. Two apps running in same device also can share information. For example, in your mobile, you are opening Make My Trip. You are searching for some train, bus, or flight. After that, you close Make My Trip. You go to YouTube or Facebook. Suddenly, you will see some advertisements of Make My Trip in YouTube. Have you observed? That means how YouTube knows what you done in Make My Trip. Do you know exactly same stations what you searched? Those advertisements it will give in YouTube. Do you know your mobile shares data between apps? That means they share data between apps. For example, you see Apple phones. When you install an app, they will ask you saying that, do you want this app to share information with other apps? If you reject that, then it will not share your information with other apps. Otherwise, what you are doing in an app can be accessed by another app. That's not a great idea. So, for example, you are using a bank app, they send an OTP. OTP comes to your SMS. SMS app is different. Now, how bank app reads that SMS automatically? Bank app or some other app is reading your SMS automatically and filling the OTPs. That means two apps running on two different devices or same device can share information between them. This technique is called as what? Distributed computing. That is called distributed computing. Actually, so there are various distributed computing technologies for different languages. There are various distributed computing technologies for different languages. Means, suppose you are developing an app with Java or .NET or PHP or Python or C++ or something. Every technology, every language have a different distributed technologies. Actually, the popular distributed computing technologies, we have Corba, we have DCOM, we have RMI, EJB, we have web services, we have remoting. This all comes under distributed computing technologies, distributed computing architectures, common object request broken architecture, distribute component object model, remote method invocation, enterprise Java beans, web service, and remoting. These all are distributed computing. Different languages use different distributed technologies. We will not go very in depth about this distributed. We will just see the outline of that. Why? Because our job is not designing distributed app. Means our job is not designing distributed application completely. Our job is to use it in the front end. React is creating UI for distributed apps. So we are going to learn some basic of distributed computing. It's a big concept to learn about distributed. So these are all distributed computing technologies. These are all distributed computing. Actually, this is distributed computing. That means distributed computing allows communication between two applications running in two different machines, or communication between two objects running in two different processes of same machine. That is distributed computing architecture. And these are all distributed computing technologies. Corba, DCOM, RMI, EJB, web service, remoting. Actually, Corba is common object request broken architecture. More than 14 languages use this distributed architecture. So we have a DCOM, distribute component object model. It is used in Visual Basic. We have RMI. It is used in J2EE, remote method invocation. We have like EJB. It is used in Java, enterprise Java beans. We have web service. It is known to all technologies. Java, .NET, PHP, Python, everybody knows one universal distributed architecture, and that is what? Web service. Web service is very popular for all. Every technology knows web service. And remoting is for .NET. .NET technology uses remoting architecture. That is a distributed computing architecture. So these are distributed computing technologies. Actually, Majority of technologies were using web service. They were using web service. Majority of the technologies use web service. Means PHP, Java, .NET, Python, all these people use web service earlier. But web services have some drawbacks. That is the reason we migrated from web services to APIs. API is advanced to web service. API is advanced to web service. Actually, we started with web services. What is web service generally? Web service is web service is a distributed computing architecture used by various technologies. So web service is a distributed computing architecture used by various technologies like Java, .NET, so PHP, Python, all these people use that, including languages like C, etc. It is a distributed computing architecture. Actually, this distributed architecture web service have some limits and restrictions. How this web service communicates? Generally, uh, web service web service communicates using three specifications. It communicates using three specifications. One is SOAP, another is REST, another is JSON. Web service communicates by using three specifications. One is SOAP, REST, and JSON. That means we have three specifications. So the problem with web service is, in web service, SOAP is primary and others are optional. SOAP is primary and others are optional. That means the primary communication used by web service is SOAP. Actually, what is this SOAP? SOAP, service oriented architecture protocol. Service oriented architecture protocol. SOAP is service oriented architecture protocol. In SOAP, what happens is, in SOAP, consumer makes XML request. Consumer makes an XML request. That means it will be like product ID is 2, like this. Consumer makes an XML request. Actually, this is like products. In the products, we have product ID. Means I'm just giving a rough structure of that. This is the product, and in that product ID. Okay, this is how the request happens generally. We have products in that one product, and that product ID is 2. Generally, XML request looks like this. That means we have some products data. In the products data, we are accessing one product whose ID is 2. That is the request from client side. Consumer means client. So consumer is nothing but the client. Client makes a XML request. Then what provider will do? Provider sends XML response. Provider is going to send an XML response. Provider means whom? Server. Clients makes a XML request and provider sends the data in the format of XML. That means the communication in SOAP is by using XML. That means request and response will be XML. That means what it will do? It will send products in that product. In that product ID is 2 and its name is TV, something like this. And its price is some price like this. XML response usually looks like this. XML response will be like this. That means you requested second product and it will get that second product details like its ID, its name, its price, its other details, everything. So this is SOAP, actually service oriented architecture protocol. So this is complex. Generally, this is very complex. The request is in XML form and the response also is in XML form. That is the request and response. This is SOAP. Now, there is another technique. We have REST. Communication can happen by using SOAP or it can happen by using REST. REST. What is the point about REST is representational state transfer. REST is representational state transfer. It is representational state transfer. What happens in REST is consumer makes a query request. Consumer makes a query request. In REST, the request is very simple, like http://server.com/products/2. Like this request will be. Or this is the new type of request. Old request will be like server.com/products question mark ID is equal to 2. Like this. That is how the old request is usually. That means consumer will not make a XML request. Consumer side request will be in which format? Simple query. It's a simple query string request. Now, how provider will respond? Provider sends XML response. Provider sends XML response. So, which is native response? Provider sends an XML response which is native. And provider can send JSON explicitly. Means not implicitly, it is explicitly. Provider can send JSON explicitly. Internally, the primary response is in which format? XML. It is in the format of XML. But externally, we can design in such a way that it can send JSON. Instead of XML, it can send JSON. So currently, majority of our communication in distributed computing is done by using REST. All technologies, majority currently using REST mechanism. Earlier, they used to use SOAP, Service Oriented Architecture Protocol. In SOAP, request and response both are in which format? XML. Currently, majority of technologies are using REST. They call them RESTful services. RESTful services means the request will be in a simple query. Response primarily will be in XML. Explicitly, you can use JSON. We have more advanced actually. JSON means already I showed you JSON response. JSON response means it will be like this. This is XML response. That means primary response will be XML. It can be in JSON. This is the response how it gets actually REST. There is another technique. Instead of REST, we can have what? JSON. JSON is JavaScript object notation. In JavaScript object notation in JSON, consumer makes JSON request. That means it will be like product ID as to. So that is how the JSON request usually makes a JSON request. And the provider sends JSON response. Provider sends the JSON response like product ID to, like name, TV, like price, surprise, like this. It is going to send the response in this way. So in distributed computing, communication between two apps is managed using three mechanisms. One is SOAP, another REST, another one JSON. So that is the concept of communication. How the communication happens. Actually, every concept is very complex. That means what is SOAP request? How the SOAP request is managed? That's a big topic. We have to just know what is difference between three types of communication. One is REST, another JSON, another one is SOAP. These are the three different communications actually. So web service specifications are this. Yeah, these are the three specifications. SOAP, REST, and JSON. SOAP is service oriented architecture protocol. In the SOAP request, usually the request will be in which form? Service consumer. Service consumer will make an XML request. Service provider will send an XML response. We have another one is REST, representational state transfer. In that, request will be in a simple query and response will be in XML. The third one is what? JSON. Here the request will be JSON, response also will be JSON. These are the communications, three specifications. Even today, several technologies are still using web service, which is not uh, majorly used everywhere now. They are using, but we are not recommending that web services anymore. We migrated from web services to another concept called what? APIs. What is the problem with web service? That means what are the issues with web service? So issues with the web service. Even today, Java, .NET, PHP, Python like technologies in the background, they are using web service. Several projects are still working on web service. Old projects there. Majority of new projects all are migrated from web services to API. What is the problem with web services? It runs only on HTTP. It runs only on HTTP. That means it cannot run on other protocols. You know, there are so many protocols in a network. HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, file, TCP, IP, so many are there. But it can run only on HTTP. You are using a private network which may not be using HTTP. There, this cannot work. So it runs only on HTTP. So it uses SOAP as primary communication. It uses SOAP as primary communication. SOAP means already we know request will be in XML form, response also will be in XML. So it runs only on HTTP. It uses SOAP as primary communication and it returns XML as primary response. XML as primary response. Always response is in the format of XML. So working with web services have these important drawbacks and means runs on HTTP means it can be used only on web servers. It can be used only on web servers. HTTP means HTTP server means web servers. These are all the major drawbacks of web service. These are the issues with web service. That is the reason we migrated from web service to web APIs. We migrated from web service to web APIs. Already several projects are using now web APIs instead of web services. What is this API is? API is application programming interface. Programming interface. It is a distributed computing mechanism. API is distributed computing mechanism. Application programming interface. It is a distributed computing mechanism. It is a distributed computing mechanism. So what is this concept of API is actually the API purpose is it makes a service request. It makes a service request which is REST. It makes a service request which is REST. REST means already we know representational state transfer. Its primary response is in a JSON form. Its primary response is in JSON format. It makes a service request which is REST and primary response is in JSON. So what is the concept of this web API is? So it defines the business logic that can make data accessible across various devices and platforms. It defines the business logic that can make data accessible across various devices and platforms. That means the main concept of API is to reach any location, any device, any operating system can understand the data. That is the primary aim. Any operating system, any device can understand the data. That means data is available anytime and on any device. That is the concept of APIs. Any device, anytime it is accessible. That is the primary aim of APIs. What is the advantage is it supports various protocols. It supports various protocols. Not only on HTTP, it can run on different protocols. And other advantages already I mentioned. It uses REST. The primary response is in which format? JSON. These are the concept of web APIs. That means actually we have database. Generally, we have a database. The data is present in database. Now we have PC, we have like mobile, or we have like some watch. Different devices are there. That means we have a PC, or we have like mobile, or even you may have a like smartwatch. This data must be available to all of them. It should reach everywhere. Then we design a business logic here. We design a business logic. This business logic communicates with the database, gets the data from the database, and makes the data accessible to any device. It can be available to any device. And that is what the business logic is API. The concept of API is to make the data available to anyone. Any device, any operating system, any location, the data is accessible. For example, you are watching weather report. You can watch on a PC, you can watch on mobile, and you can even see it on your smartwatch. On a smartwatch also, same weather will come. How data is reachable even to a smartwatch, small smartwatch? That is because of API, application programming interface. The aim of API is to make the data available to all. That's the concept. Actually, these APIs, do you know world's first API? World's first API is eBay. eBay is the world's first API. eBay is a shopping site. Even today, in your Amazon, Flipkart, shopping ERP architecture is provided by eBay only. Even Amazon and Flipkart like people use the business architecture of eBay. They use the architecture of eBay. eBay is an API. You can see, suppose you have Phone Pay or Paytm. You see on Phone Pay, Paytm like apps, you have shopping, you know, you have shopping, you can buy some products on them. That shopping is eBay. That is powered by eBay. Now imagine how much lightweight it is. That means in a app like Phone Pay or Paytm, another app is working. Another app is working. That means how lightweight it is, how fast it is. This is the API concept actually. So we migrated from web services to API. Earlier, we used to do this by using a concept called what? Web service. Now we moved from web service to what? APIs. The concept of API is that the concept of API. So this is actually web's API. This is the concept of API. So we have the database, the business logic, which can make the data available everywhere. Any device, any operating system can understand. So these are the APIs actually. API growth. In 2000, the first API was eBay. After that, so many APIs came. So many APIs are here. And you can see this, my diagram is showing only 2010 because I prepared this presentation in 2010. That means after that I stopped this because thousands of APIs are there. Earlier we used to train people on APIs. When we train people on APIs on technology like .NET and all, 14, 15 years back, we started training people on APIs. Right now, people, before that we were using web service, we migrated from web service to API. So this presentation actually I prepared for .NET technology because I belong to the .NET technology, and on that technology we were there before .NET was born. That means we saw .NET born, right? We trained people on .NET when first .NET came to market. In the technologies, we used to train people on APIs. So at that time, we prepared this presentation, and after that, we stopped the API graph because the millions of APIs are there now. We stopped the API graph because millions. At that time, we used to tell people that, do you know these 4 are APIs, these 5 are APIs, like that. Now there are millions of APIs. So no need of these graphs anymore. That is just basic point actually. So this complete presentation belongs to that .NET technology only, but I given you a basic overview of that. Actually, you don't need in technologies like .NET, after web services, we used a concept called WCF. After that, we migrated to API. That means there was another concept between web service and APIs. But other technologies don't know this. Other technologies don't know this. Other technologies migrated from web services to API. But .NET people have 3 layers. First, you are using web service. After that, they have WCF. After that, they came to APIs, web APIs. So Other technologies directly from web service to APIs. Now current generation is what? APIs. Current generation is the concept of API. This is the main concept of API. That means now how data can be made in such a way that every device can understand, every operating system can understand. How to create these APIs, I will tell you. We will discuss about that. But we will see some ready-made API first. These are all ready-made APIs as I showed you. These are all the ready-made APIs. Now you have an answer for this question. So what is an API? And this is the answer for that. So to understand API, you should know the concept of distributed computing. That means now tell me what you understood about API. What API means? API means accessing data from the source and converting in a format in such a way that any device, any operating system can understand. That means make the data reachable to any device and any operating system. The primary aim of API is that. That's how we use the API. That's the reason you see here. Suppose I'm opening some website like api.nasa. This is NASA people API. That means NASA people say that if you are a developer and you have interest in building apps related to space, then whatever data you need related to space, we will freely provide you. You can use the data, means videos, photos, all the graph data they provide. They have a separate website for that, api.nasa.gov. You open this here, you see browse APIs. When you say browse APIs, you see lot of APIs are there. Different APIs they are providing. In that, suppose I am selecting NASA Mars rover photos. You see Mars rover photos and it will show the APIs here. These are the queries. You see API have a simple query request. Request is a simple query. Okay, let's make a query request. When I make a query request, the response is in the format of JSON. Earlier in the beginning, 7-8 years back, this same website used to show us the data in XML. 7-8 years back, when we trained people on APIs, this website was primarily sending data in XML. We have to teach them XML and we have to tell them how to use the XML. But now they transformed from XML to JSON. That means the same APIs 10 years back when we used, they were XML. Now they improved, they changed from XML to what? JSON. You see, this is not XML. Na? You know already JavaScript. What is this? Means object. Object have a property called photos. Photos is what type? Array. Array of object. And in that again so many are there. Again object. Now what is the job of React developer or an Angular developer or a front-end developer is consume the data coming from these APIs and create a presentation. That means the data comes from here. We have to create a good user interface and we need to present the data using that interface. Let's see how to do this. We will see a simple point, how we can consume the data and how we can access. So let's see one example here. What we will do now is I will copy this URL. You know, this is the URL from where data is coming. Let's copy this URL. This is NASA API. Let's take one example of api.nasa.gov. Now, what I am doing is visiting this website and I am selecting this API's Mars rover photos. Okay, copy this URL. This is the URL, copy that and go to your project. In this project, let's create a new component by name NASA API. Okay, a new file NASA API dot what JSX. Now let's create export function NASA API and return. So a simple container with a heading Mars rover photos. So this is Mars rover photos. Here I want to display the Mars rover photos. And where is the data coming from? Data is coming from this URL. So I will copy that URL. And here, observe carefully. What is the final result coming? Object. Final result coming is an object. So that means we will create a constant photos. Actually, this is Mars. Mars object. Okay. Set Mars object is equal to use state. What is the data type? Data is what? Object. That means the data coming from there is an object type. Okay. You can even do it more better way. You already saw in that object, there is a key called what? Photos. Photos is what type? Array. Photos is array. Array of what? Object. In that, what data they are providing? So ID, sol, camera, like that. Or without that also, just primarily mention what data is finally coming actually. What data is coming? Object. Okay, let's keep it like that. Now I will write a function called load data. Okay, this function has to connect with live API, get the data from there and load into this object. Then for that to communicate with remote API, we need Axios. We are using Axios. We can use all the methods. You can try XML, HTTP, or you can use jQuery or fetch. But what is the best one we learned in React? Axios. Axios dot what? Get. Get from this particular URL. Paste that URL here. That is the URL from where data is coming. It is RESTful. Na? RESTful means consumer will make a request in the form of query. And the sender is sending a response in the form of JSON. JSON, right? Now, then we will get a response. And you know that in Axios, response have several details like response status text. Another one is response data. That response data we need to set into what? Set Mars object. What we need to set into the Mars object, we have to set response dot what? Data. So whatever data coming from this URL, we are storing in this location. Okay, now data is in this object. And you know that that object is having a property called photos. Photos is what type? Array. That means what we have to do? Here we have to use Mars object dot what? Photos. Photos dot what? Map. Because that Mars object is this object and photos is this array and we need to map, and for every photo ID is coming, You see, ID is a number, sol is a number, camera is again object. Camera have a full name, which is camera name, which camera took the photo. We have image SRC. Remember, this is one object inside object. Image SRC. Image SRC is what? It is the path. We will display only few details and see rover is again object. We have a rover name, which rover took the photo. Now, what is our job? We have to create a presentation. Let's do one thing. Go to index.js, keep this in the startup. What is it? NASA API. Okay, let's start this. npm start. Okay, now what we will do is here in this now, the load data should execute when component mounts. How to write component mount? Use effect. Use effect is written for component mount. You know how to write the use effect. On use effect, we have to call the function called what? Load data. Now the data is ready. Now this data we want to display below. Because hundreds of photos are coming, we will design like a card. Let's create like main. In the main, I will keep class as dflex, justify flex wrap. We are using flex wrap. And inside this, we need to read all the data in present. So how to read all the data? Binding expression. What is it? Mars object. Mars object have a property called photos. Photos is an array type. We are using map. We read every photo, and for every photo, we will generate a div. And this div will have a class. It will have a class called card. Margin 2, padding 2, and this will have a style. Style is what? Width. Width is how much? Some 200 pixel. Width 200 pixel. Later we will learn style binding concept. I will tell you in next session we will discuss. We will learn how to write different styles. Now in this we have a div, we have an image. Image contains, so SRC is coming from photo dot img underscore SRC. Actually, you see in their data, there is img underscore SRC, which is the photo path. We are accessing the photo and displaying it. Okay. I will put this as class as card image top. And inside this, we will create class as card header. In the card header, we will put a photo ID. How to get the photo ID? Photo dot what? ID. After that, we will design a class card body. In the card body, we will create a data list, data term, camera name. How to get the camera name? Camera name we will get by using photo dot camera dot full underscore name. You see here in their data, there is a camera object. The camera object is having a property called full name. We are accessing the full name. Okay, next we have rover. Which rover took the photo? We have photo dot rover dot name. That is getting the rover name. You see, they have a rover object. That rover object have a name, rover name. Okay. And this is repeating, then it should have a key. Key is what? Photo dot ID. I will use that as a key. Let's save this and see now. and you can see that all the data will come like this. This is the data. This is the data. And photo, we will keep height, something like height as 150. That means all the photos in the card will have a same height here and display that here. So we are accessing the data and displaying here from different source. The data will come and show. It is having some problem like map. This problem will come. You have to do one more work here. Actually, the photo came. What is the problem with map? Why it is showing the map? Because it is saying that this is an object. So we know that object have which one? Photos. Photos is what type? Array type. Then it should get the data and display the data there. You see the data is coming now. To avoid that map issue, we have to tell that photos is what type? Array. Now you see all the data. They have hundreds of photos. That depends on how you present their data. You can do a lot of things. You can do a lot of things. That means actually our job is not just creating presentation, creating interaction. That means what our job is design, filter, sorting, searching inside this. That means when you go to any React interviews, what they do, just like NASA API, they will give you their API. They will say that our data is present here. And they will give you some screenshots. They will ask you design this screen according to this data. In that, not only presentation, filtering, searching, sorting, so much they will give. That means, for example, currently it is showing all photos. How many photos are there? Hundreds are there. We don't want like that. What they will do, they will ask you like, okay, put a drop down here, put a drop down there, and from there, user can select which rover. Means they have 4 rovers on Mars. Which rover? You select that rover name, only that rover photos must come. They will tell you that put a date picker, date and time picker will be there. They will say that select from date to date, and only photos taken on that date should come. Like that, you have to design the interactions. They will provide only data. In that data, all information is present. You see, even on which date it taken also there. On which date it taken, everything will be there. Your job is to understand how to create the presentation for that. You see landing date, launch date, everything will be defined here. So technically, React developers or any front-end developer job is consuming the data from the API and creating the presentation with interactions. So you have seen just only one example how we can get the data. Earlier, what we were doing, we were creating one JSON file, some data we are keeping there, we are accessing and using. Now we are really fetching from a live API. We will see another online shopping, whether we will see different, how to communicate with different types of APIs. So I showed you just to make you understand how to connect with various API. This is an example, NASA API dot what JSX. I will copy this example and I will keep this example now. Now, once you know how to connect with this API, we will create a small interaction. We will create a small shopping like interaction. How shopping sites create filters and all those things we will design. But for that, we have to know about other concepts also. Till now, you learned about only one topic. What is the topic you learned about? Data binding. These all concepts I showed you under the topic of data binding. Now, after data binding, we have to learn about style binding, class binding, and event binding. If we know these, then we can design one app. To create an app, you have to have API and you have to learn all these concepts. Till now, you learned only one. What is it? Data binding. Now we will see what is style binding, class binding, and event binding. Then we can start developing an app, creating a project to interact with the APIs. That we'll see in next session. Tomorrow we will do that. In tomorrow's session, we will learn style binding, class binding, and event. Once we finish this, we can start building a project with the APIs. Right? First, you try this NASA API, what I showed you. Then tomorrow we will continue with that. Okay? Right.